We'll intervene whenever we decide it's in our national security interest to intervene. And if you don't like it, lump it.
The problem with America is not that we go around marauding around the world imposing ourselves. The problem with America in the last 10, 15 years since the end of the Cold War, really in the last 60 years, is that we've been too slow to get involved.
I don't know how many Iraqi civilians were killed, but I can assure you that the number is the absolute minimal that it's possible in modern warfare.
Every nation in every region now has a decision to make. Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists.
You know, that land over there is yours. You'll go back to it one day because your fight will prevail and you'll have your homes and your mosques back again because your cause is right and God is on your side.
Welcome to the Darkened
Welcome to another episode of the Darkened Hour. I'm with my co-host Richard Cox, and with us today is Raymond Holcomb. Ray Holcomb has over 30 years' experience as a law enforcement and intelligence officer. He served for 23 years as FBI Special Agent, 8 as a strategic planner with the National Counterterrorism Center, and 4 as a state Homeland Security Advisor. Ray's FBI career included 15 years investigating foreign espionage, major drug trafficking organizations, organized crime, and national security matters. He also served as a member of the FBI's New York SWAT team and was appointed commander of the team from 1998 to 2001. Under Ray's leadership, the New York SWAT team assumed an expanded role, being involved in high-risk domestic arrests, providing overseas security and enhanced investigative capability for FBI teams deploying internationally in response to terrorism. He's also the author of Endless Enemies, Inside FBI Counterterrorism, to which we're going to be talking about a bit today. Ray, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Adam.
You know, you always seem to have a sheer fascination with being involved with law enforcement at a very early age. Why is that?
I think I grew up at a time when there was a fervor, a patriotic fervor in the country. I'm talking about post-World War II, post-Korean War. The Cold War was at its height. We were taught in school that we were proud to be Americans and that the greatest threat to our democracy was communism. And that's how we were all brought up.
You made your ranks through a lot of the units within New York, and you began working under John O'Neill at the National Security Division. How did you become part of this unit, and what did it entail?
It was a special unit, Adam. It was focused on counterintelligence, which is, it's spotting or identifying the people who are spying on us. I was selected after working on a organized crime squad and a counter narcotics squad. I was sponsored by other agents on that unit, and I was chosen to be part of that unit, which was under the oversight of John O'Neill.
You also tend to mention in Chapter 8 of your book that the trip to Tanzania and Dar es Salaam in the aftermath of the U.S. Embassy bombings made you realize that the extent of the threat that John O'Neill used to talk about regarding bin Laden and al-Qaeda and how this new terrorism posed to the United States. Can you explain more of what you meant here in the book?
Well, my focus, like many in the FBI up until that point, had been organized crime, and that was a regional problem. Every region in the States had a problem with a particular crime family, and then Asian narcotics. By that I mean that there was a tremendous flow of heroin coming in from Unsa, Golden Triangle, through the former Commonwealth, was coming in through Canada down into the United States, and there was a significant influx of high quality heroin into North America. So we were focused on that. And at the same time, I guess it was '93 first World Trade Center bombing, and then you had the Treblinka plot, and then you had the bombings in East Africa, the embassy bombings in East Africa. That's when some of us, and it didn't take a whole lot of thinking, but some of us began to realize there was a foreign group that was dead serious about coming after the United States. But still, even after the embassy bombings, it wasn't until the attack on the USS Cole, that I think headquarters, Washington D.C. in general, realized that this was a very serious threat.
You know, regarding the embassy bombings, and what reminded me of the 1993 World Trade Center bombing was the fact that the FBI evidence response team found a piece of the twisted metal called the chassis from the truck with the VIN number on it. Can you talk more about this and what came from it?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things the FBI always did really well. You know, conducting a crime scene and collecting evidence. Our forensic teams are well trained in the forefront of the science, and they're dogged. They were on the ground literally, you know, within a day of those bombings. We had people on the ground, and they were conducting a classic crime scene searches. I've been part of those. They're methodical. They require a lot of planning. They require a lot of patience. But the people who do that, that's primarily what they do. And some hundreds of meters out from the bomb, one of the agents, probably on his hands and knees, found this jagged piece of metal and noticed immediately that there was a VIN number or something that resembled a VIN number imprinted on the metal. Well, they took that VIN number, raised the VIN number, and very quickly they were able to track it down to a vehicle that had been imported into Africa from Southeast Asia. I can't recall the exact details. And then they tracked it down to the dealership in Africa that sold that vehicle, and they found the records that identified the purchaser. It was classic investigative effort. It was classic. It was just what the FBI and other police agencies do all the time.
Okay, so fast forward to Yemen, which is you were sent to assist in the investigation with your security team regarding the USS Cole. However, you are actually met with a very hostile environment. Yemeni officials, sympathetic to Al-Qaeda, yet unruly crowds who had a U.S. Yemeni ambassador in Barbara Bodine, who wanted to be a primary face of the latest news to Washington, was an instigator for John O'Neill. Yet you made some progress in the case by interviewing locals and finding key bits of evidence. Can you tell us more about your experience there in the case?
Well, again, we worked that case with the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, and we developed a very close bond with some of their investigators. And we were dogged. Ali Soufan was one of our lead investigators. He's Muslim. He speaks Arabic, and he was very well received. And he had a great style. He was very well received, and he started to make progress. The ambassador Bodine, was clearly uncomfortable that she wasn't running the investigation. And there was some personality issues between her and John O'Neill, who deployed with the first team. He was on the ground. He was on the on-scene commander force and the first group that arrived there. And Ambassador Bodine and John O'Neill did not see eye to eye. John O'Neill was sent home. PNG John O'Neill said, you can't, persona non grata, send him back to the U.S. She tried to control our investigation. For instance, when we would be interviewing or interrogating suspects, we, of course, would allow a Yemeni officer, detective, investigator be present in the room. But Ambassador Bodine demanded that there also be State Department people in the room. We pushed back on that and said, no, if this goes to trial, your people are going to be witnesses, and they're going to have to come stateside, and they're going to have to testify in the trial as to what they heard and what they saw. Well, that didn't work. So eventually, the people in charge of the New York division, John O'Neill being one of them, decided to shut down the investigation. We were making great progress. He said, we can't work under these circumstances, and he brought us all home. And it came to a stalemate. I mean, it was dead in the water at that moment because we couldn't function under State Department oversight. We couldn't do our job properly under State Department oversight.
The main issue between Al-Qaeda Communications Hub was the nexus between the hub and two of the 9/11 hijackers in Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi.
Right.
The CIA and NSA had known about these two, and they had traveled to a meeting in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Mm-hmm. However, the FBI were not allowed to share this information to headquarters after seeing the cable that came in, which stated that they were coming to the United States and had dual U.S. visas.
Right.
Why do you think the CIA did not permit the FBI to share this pertinent information with you?
Well, you can understand there has always been interagency tension, always been interagency rivalry. For the FBI has preeminence in criminal investigations inside the United States. And that's our domain, and that includes counterterrorism and counterintelligence investigations inside the United States. Now, if an American citizen or American property is somehow injured or overseas, the FBI still has the preeminent role in investigating that crime. The CIA and NSA, on the other hand, their primary mission is collecting intelligence, signal intelligence, human intelligence, whatever the fashion or the form, around the world. And they collect that intelligence and use it for various purposes. For one thing, they keep the President of the United States and the National Security Council abreast of worldwide threats and what's taking place. So we have these roles that oftentimes butt up against each other. And this was a classic situation where they were collecting intelligence on individuals, and they believed, this is what I've been told, they believed that once, again, correct me, who was the first to arrive in the U.S.?
Khalid al-Mihdhar, Nawaf al-Hazmi.
Yeah, well, Mihdhar, they believed they had him under surveillance from the get-go. And they believed once he was in the United States that they could approach him and recruit him. They knew he had connections to Al-Qaeda, obviously, because he met Al-Qaeda-linked individuals in Malaysia. So they were intending to approach him and recruit him once he was inside the United States.
Well, the latest, just to follow up on that, and it proves your point, because the Canestrell document is from Donald Canestrell, as he's part of the Office of Military Commissions investigating Saudi involvement with the 9/11 attacks. And what he found from interviewing people at the Bin Laden issue station and congressional officials was that there was a coordinated effort by the CIA to withhold information from the FBI about these two men. And not only that, they were running an operation which would be deemed illegal along with Saudi intelligence in monitoring both of these men inside the United States. And there is actually a part in the Joint House inquiry, which I've made even a special podcast episode on, where Carl Levin actually asks George Tenet, the DCI, basically telling him, did you even know about this cable that came in? And George Tenet lies and basically says nobody read that cable in the March timeframe, but yet over 50 case officers and analysts have read that cable. And of course, what we've just talked about is that this information was withheld because I've interviewed Mark Rossini from the FBI, and he basically said that, yes, that I was not allowed with Doug Miller not to share that information with FBI headquarters or I would be arrested.
Yeah, and you know this, Adam. There was a thing called the curtain or the wall, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and you had a lower burden of proof if you're going to work counterintelligence cases, right? There was a lower burden of proof to start an investigation on an individual in a counterintelligence case. So if you had a clear suspicion, you were given certain warrants and authorities to eavesdrop or investigate individuals, including American citizens. And then on the other side of that wall, right, is your criminal side, where you have that higher burden of proof to open, probable cause beyond a reasonable doubt. You have to convince the court that you have probable cause to conduct these intrusions, and to conduct these investigations. Whereas you don't need that on the other side of the wall, intelligence side of it. So there was always, and this is internal too to the FBI. I'm not saying that the FBI was blameless, because there were people in the FBI that were working side by side with the CIA. Some of them were detailed over to Langley, and they were working side by side with the CIA, and they were getting bits and pieces of what was going on, bits and pieces. They were greatly uncomfortable with the fact that they were told, you can't share this information with the other side of your organization, with the criminal side of your organization. They were told that it would put them in jeopardy, their clearances, and possibly even worse. So there were some folks that were put in that position that were unable to share some, and they didn't get all the information. They were seeing bits and pieces, right? So that was taking place. You had the curtain, the wall, whatever it's been. I would add here that I've read the 9/11 Commission report, and I think by and large, and I know a lot of people who testified in that report, I think by and large it's fairly accurate.
I know a lot of people tend to, especially on the conspiracy side, tend to say that the report is false, but I would say it's an incomplete report,
right?
Only because it didn't add the NSA and the CIA's monitoring of the Yemen hub or the Able Danger program run by the Defense Intelligence Agency.
Right.
But I just want to make something clear with you, Ray. You were in Yemen when the 9/11 attacks were taking place.
Yeah.
So and at the same time, you're aware that there's an Al-Qaeda communication sub. But I want to ask you, were you or the FBI even aware that the CIA and NSA were listening to the phone calls of the Al-Qaeda communication sub beginning in '96?
No. At least those in the FBI who I had a close relationship, including Ali Stufan and some of our top counterterrorism investigators. No, as far as I know, no, they were not aware.
It just seems to be like it's tough for me. This is I know you were. I know that there's a wall and that there's like a sharing of information that is basically tentative. When Dan Cohen created the Alex Station, he basically wanted to have all the intelligence services basically, I don't know if it's naivety on his part, but basically working in conjunction with one another honestly. Right. But that wasn't the case right off the bat. Right. Whether it was Shoya disposition toward O'Neill or vice versa, or a combination of both. But it seemed that there was this nexus, this small nexus of analysts that basically did not want to share all information with the FBI regarding Al-Qaeda and Al-Qaeda affiliates in Yemen for whatever reason, for if they wanted to flip al-Midar and al-Hazmi. But look at the repercussions of what happened.
Sure.
And to me, Ray, this is the biggest, like, I'm very critical of NSA CIA here, and mainly more so NSA, because they seem to have been all but forgotten. But yet even the CIA basically says, and it's coming from Shoya, that the NSA was the gold mine of information regarding Al-Qaeda, because at least they were monitoring bin Laden's satellite phones that began even in the early 90s. And of course, the Yemen hub since 96. I mean, that's a ton of information.
Yep. It's hard to believe, isn't it, Adam? I remember the moment. In the Sana'a, the U.S. Embassy in Sana'a. I think it was within a day or two of the 9/11 attack. I remember the moment when Ali Soufan came out of the chief of station's office, and he had a look of shock on his face. And he walked up to me and he said, and I'm paraphrasing here because who can remember 22 years ago, right? He walked up to me with a look of shock on his face and he said, they've been listening for months and months. They knew that Al-Qaeda individuals have been dispatched and traveled to the U.S. And this is the first Ali Soufan, our lead investigator, ever heard of this. The chief of station that day shared that information for the first time with the FBI.
Why did they do it? Why did they even share it?
Well, you think about it. Think about what just happened. The drums were beating, right? The drums were beating. America was very angry, to the extent that even the then president of Yemen, Saleh, right? He called us in, and I and another agent were Ali's security. We went down to President Saleh's office, and President Saleh personally apologized to Soufan and the NCIS official who was partnered with us for the attack. He was very emotional, very upset. And it was at that point in time that we learned that the Yemenis had several Al-Qaeda in custody, and they had never told us for weeks before. They never mentioned that they had these people in custody. I believe that because of the drumbeat coming out of the United States, they were scared. They were scared that they would somehow be linked to Al-Qaeda. They were scared. By them, I mean the President Saleh and the Yemeni government. They were concerned that we were going to somehow blame them as accomplices with the attack. And at that point on, they couldn't have given us more assistance. From that moment on, they couldn't have cooperated with us more.
You know, one thing I learned about the book too was that Ali Soufan had gotten a really good rapport with Ramzi bin al-Shibh when he was captured. But just like with Abu Zubaydah, again, the CIA manages to steer the FBI away from any further progress. Now, I'm going to ask for your opinion here. If the FBI had been allowed to had longer unfettered access to bin al-Shibh, and you had proper time to interrogate him, what do you think you could have gotten out of him that the CIA didn't?
I wasn't privy to those. I wasn't in the room when all of those interviews, I won't call them interrogations. They weren't interrogations.
Yeah, you weren't torturing it, right?
No, Ali, his approach, I watched him in action with other subjects. His approach was to develop rapport, and he became almost like a father confessor to the subjects, He was Islamic. He understood the Quran thoroughly, and within a short period of time, most of these subjects just confessed to him and opened up and told him most everything. It was miraculous. I saw him break a hunger strike in Guantanamo that had with a key suspect, a key subject. The hunger strike had been going on for a while, and he was refusing to give any more information. Within 24 hours, Ali Soufan had him talking like a fire hose. So getting back to your question, I think President Salah was worried. He was scared. He was scared that they were going to be linked to the attack, and that there was going to be retribution worldwide, and that they were going to be they were going to get punished. So they couldn't, from that point on, they were extremely cooperative.
I know you're short for time. Richard, do you have any follow-up questions at all?
No, you carry on, Adam. You're asking everything I would, so you carry on capturing the ship.
So, well, Ray, as we wind down here, we're 22 years now past on the attacks, and we still haven't had a trial. Do you think we'll ever have a trial regarding the Guantanamo 5 that are suspected of the attacks?
No, never. I don't think so.
Hey,
Adam, we did, from the FBI perspective, we did everything we could to handle those investigations, just like with every terrorism investigation. I alluded to this earlier. We tried to conduct every one of those investigations by the book, so that it was always on our mind that the way we asked the questions, the way we treated the suspect or the subject, the way we documented what that individual said would someday be brought into court in the United States, and it had to pass muster. So everything we did with our judicial system in mind. Did it slow us down? Did it make us a little less effective than what some of the other organizations were doing? Maybe, possibly, yes. But everything we produced was viable in a U.S. court of law. Everything. And that was our end game. And we were always about prosecuting these people back in the United States. And I told you, maybe I could allude to this, in Tanzania, when the individual we were interviewing in conjunction with the Tanzanians, he had managed the safe house for the bombers. And after days and days and days of light interrogation, let's call it interviewing, he finally said he wanted to talk. He wanted to tell us everything he knew. So what did we do? My first job was to get on the phone and call John O'Neill in Washington, D.C. And what was I told? Get him a lawyer. I walked back into the room, right, with a handful of Tanzanian police, State Department police, CIA people, and I said, stop talking right now. Where can we get a counsel or an attorney for this individual? They looked at me in shock. And finally they said, wait, there's a law school downtown. They jumped in a car. This is a true story. They jump in this car, drive downtown, dragged a law school professor. Now you understand that in Tanzania, they still follow the common law to some extent. Mm-hmm. Similar jurisprudence as we do. They grabbed this professor out of the classroom. He's terrified because he doesn't know where he's being taken or what he's done. He still had his wig and his cloak when they dragged him into the one police plaza, as we called it in Tanzania, and he was scared. He didn't know why he was being. And he walked in the room. We said, "Sir, you're now the attorney for this subject," and he took the subject in the back room. They had a conversation for about an hour. He came back out and he said, "My client is prepared to give you a full statement." which he did. After that was over, we asked the attorney, how did that happen? How did you get him to cooperate so quickly? He said he'd rather spend his prison sentence in an American prison than a Tanzanian prison.
My last question, Ray, history tends to repeat itself in some form.
Right.
Do you feel that a 9/11 style attack could happen in the future, and the worry would be that certain domestic intelligence services would not share information in the future? Do you think something like that could happen?
You know what? I don't, Adam. I think that we've become such in some regards, totally overly transparent society, right? Whether it's because of social media, the internet, whatever. It's really hard to keep a secret in the United States. I think that we are due, and it's coming, a 9/11-like attack. We're allowing hundreds, if not more, of potential terrorists into our southern border. You see what's going on in Israel right now. I think it's coming. There's no question about it. And I think our agencies are distracted. I think our key intelligence security agencies have been distracted for years now. There hasn't been a legitimate concern about international terrorism. They're more focused on, concerns about domestic terrorism and other issues than they are about the Islamic extremist threat. But it's coming back. There's no question about it. But the intelligence agencies that should have been identifying this Hamas buildup in Gaza, maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But it looks to me like the Israelis were caught totally off guard. Why were these? We'll find out. I guess at some point we're going to learn how that happened. But I think our intelligence agencies and our security agencies are totally distracted. Whether that's intentional or not, I could only speculate. But I think they're focused on the wrong thing.
Ray Holcomb, former FBI special agent and author of Endless Enemies Inside FBI Counterterrorism. I can't thank you enough for coming on the show today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Adam. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ray.